This is a bit of an unusual video, but since I'm not only interested in Roman history, but also in movies, I thought it might be a good idea to explore some movies set in the late Roman Empire, the era of the Roman Empire which is the main focus of this channel. Because we know that there is a vast predominance of movies that take place in the late Roman Republic and the early Roman Empire. We have seen countless movies about Caesar, about Augustus, when Rome was in its prime. But what about the later Roman Empire, when the good times were already over, when the decline would start to set in? Are there any good movies set in that fascinating period, which is of utmost interest to myself and to anyone interested in the late Roman Empire? Number 10. King Arthur. King Arthur tells the story of the legendary King Arthur, who in this filmic interpretation of the old British legend is a Roman commander called Artorius Castus. Of course, all the famous characters of the Arthurian legend are also to be found here: Merlin, Galahad, Guinevere, and so on. The movie has a pretty good cast. Some famous actors from back in the day are in here, such as Clive Owen, Keira Knightley, and others. The plot is quite simplistic, there are no real surprises here, but of course many battles. Regarding accuracy, as you might guess, the movie being based on the Arthurian legend does not have to abide by historical facts, but of course it makes the mistake that almost all movies about the late Roman Empire make. It gets the civilian clothing and the equipment and armor of the Roman soldiers completely wrong. Because this is not how a late Roman comitatus or limitanei soldier of the early 5th century would have looked. That type of equipment would have been more accurate 400 years earlier. But then again, many movies get this wrong. And then there are some other historical inaccuracies. For example, the withdrawal of Roman troops from Britain takes place 50 years too late in this movie, in the year 452 AD, and not in the year 407 AD as in reality, because of the usurpation of Constantine III. So all in all, the movie neither has historical accuracy nor interesting surprises or fascinating themes, and it's basically only a quite simplistic action movie with many battle scenes, thus it only barely made it onto the list. Number 9. St. Augustine. This is an Italian movie from 2010 that tells the story of the life of Augustine of Hippo, the famous church father who wrote The City of God and who was bishop of the city of Hippo Regius in the western Roman province of Africa Proconsularis. This two-part movie is quite interesting because it has some really impressive set pieces. The reconstruction of the late western imperial cities of that time is quite well done, I have to say. But of course, as we expect from most movies about Roman history, the attire of the late Romans is quite completely wrong. The soldiers still wear Galea helmets, Lorica segmentata battle armor, and the pilum, and this movie takes place over a few decades around the year 400 AD. By that time, the Roman soldiers had a completely different equipment, as I discussed in this video here. But the clothing of civilians is also wrong. It is far too extravagant, and there are way too many togas, when in fact the toga was never really popular as an everyday dress, and much less so in late antiquity. We don't see one single late style tunic, painula or pileus panonicus hat in the entire movie, which is a letdown for a film that claims to be historically accurate. Other things and details about Augustine of Hippo are also plain wrong, and the movie conveniently leaves out Augustine's aggressive anti-pagan actions, which led to widespread riots in Carthage in 404, where 60 people died, or how he commanded the destruction and desecration of many pagan temples, shrines and statues, which is also conveniently left out in order to paint him in a positive light, because he's a saint after all, is he not? The entertainment value is okay-ish, but it's quite slow-paced and I found it quite frankly pretty boring at times. But it has some interesting themes and good set pieces, and so it could also be far worse. So for me it's a bit better than King Arthur. Number 8. Attila. Long before Gerard Butler played the legendary King Leonidas in the movie 300, he did actually also play Attila the Hun. What weirder casting choice could one imagine for the Scourge of the Earth than Gerard Butler? But who really shines in this film is Powers Booth as the legendary Magister Militum Flavius Aetius. Unfortunately though, as you might have guessed, the historical accuracy is not where this movie shines. Yes, the historical characters existed, Aetius, Attila, Even Valentinian III is present, as well as his mother Galla Placidia. But this is already where the historical accuracy ends. The Roman soldiers look like from the late Republic 500 years earlier. The attire of the Romans is of course also completely out of place. Then the complexities of the time are oversimplified, and there are just so many mistakes or things that were just completely different from how all this really went down. And yet still, I somehow find myself enjoying this movie. Probably because even though historically full of mistakes or inaccuracies, still somehow this movie has some weird charm. If one overlooks the wild inaccuracies, it's kind of fun to see Gerard Butler as Attila the Hun and Powers Booth as Flavius Aetius. And if you are a Rome nerd, and chances are high that you are if you are watching this video, then you might be interested in the incredible rings and other Roman accessories which SPQR Shop is building. They have legionary rings, they have rings with different themes, they even have coins, statues, pendants, attributes and terracottas. And the most incredible thing is that they handcraft every single piece. That's right, this is really high quality handcrafted stuff. There is really no better present for yourself or someone you know who might be a Rome fan. I put the link to their shop in the video description and pinned comment, and with this link you can get a 10% rebate on every purchase. So go and check out their assortment, it's really quite impressive. Number 7. The Fall of the Roman Empire. Okay, normally I wouldn't put such an old movie from 1964 onto the list here, but this one is different. I had to, because this movie has hands down some of the most incredible set pieces of all time. Now yes, technically also I shouldn't really put the movie here because it takes place during the reign of Commodus, so technically this is not yet the late Roman Empire. But it's still a refreshing departure from all the Caesar and Augustus focus and obsession of Hollywood, so it's still nice that they picked this time period. Now of course here also, we should not expect some excellent historical accuracy. In fact, the movie deviates very much from real events. For instance, Marcus Aurelius in this version does not nominate Commodus as his successor, and we know that in reality, Marcus Aurelius did appoint his son co-emperor already in 176 AD, and other such inaccuracies are abound in this movie, as we can imagine. But where this movie really shines is the incredible set of the Forum Romanum. They actually rebuilt the entire Forum Romanum for this movie on an area of 92,000 square meters, which still counts as one of the largest movie sets ever built. In general, the set pieces in this film are outstanding, and so I will overlook some of the weaknesses. Now of course the film is full of 60s cinema kitsch and 60s style acting, but there is exactly for that reason some nostalgia entertainment value, and so I find myself liking this piece of classic cinema history. Number 6. The Last Legion. Now here is an interesting one because it takes place during the last days of the Western Roman Empire and tries to tie it together with the Arthur legend. It's somewhat loosely based on the book with the same title by Valerio M. Manfredi. Contrary to King Arthur from before though, it plays some 70 years later when the last Western Roman Emperor Romulus Augustus was deposed. Of course, we hardcore Roman boos know that Julius Nepos was the last legitimate Western Roman Emperor, but come on, we shouldn't be too strict here. The film has a pretty good cast, Colin Firth as Aurelius, Ben Kingsley as Ambrosianus, among other well-known faces. In my opinion, this movie does a good job of tying the Roman roots to the Arthur legend, even though of course, please don't expect a lot of historical accuracy. Again, as in so many other movies, the dresses and attire of the Romans are out of place, and of course, as so often, the late Roman soldiers look like they would have hundreds of years earlier. You will look in vain for a lorica squamata, or for a ridge helmet, or for an oval shield, or for a spiculum. Of course, the story is fictitious, so historical inaccuracies do occur, but at least the movie tries to tie in events from late Roman history, such as the usurpation of Odoacer, who also plays a role in this movie. So overall, I kind of enjoyed this movie. Seriously, it's not so bad, and if we overlook the inaccuracies, then it does have some entertainment value. Number 5. BBC Rise and Fall of an Empire, Constantine. The BBC produced a 6-part series on the rise and fall of the Roman Empire back in 2005 and 2006 called, well, Rise and Fall of an Empire. These are strictly speaking not movies but docu-dramas, half movie, half narrated documentary. But this format does work and is, at least for me and probably for other late Roman history fans, quite an excellent watch. One of the episodes from this BBC docudrama tells how Constantine rose to power and became sole emperor of the Roman Empire. Now, even a documentary style film is not safe from making mistakes, and here too we will find some historical inaccuracies or exaggerations. Of course, Maxentius is painted as an idiotic and cruel tyrant. It's sad that the BBC fell for this old trope, because by now we actually know that almost all of our knowledge of Maxentius is based on Constantine's later propaganda, which painted him as a bloodthirsty and stupid tyrant. Apparently Constantine's propaganda worked so well that the BBC fell for it. Also, the murder of Constantine's son Crispus and his wife Fausta is conveniently left out. But overall, this docudrama episode at least gets the equipment of the soldiers right. Chainmail, Attic helmet and oval shields instead of the old legions from before the crisis of the 3rd century. Also, Pileus Panonicus, nice. So regarding the attire, it does some things right. The actors are great, they are kind of lesser known actors, but they do an incredibly good job. David Threlfall as Constantine just absolutely shines. And well, the story is engaging because we know that reality sometimes writes stories better than fiction. Number 4. BBC Heroes and Villains Attila the Hun. This is another BBC docudrama, this time from the series Heroes and Villains. This particular episode deals with Attila the Hun from the time of his invasion of the Eastern Roman Empire in the early 440s AD to the aftermath of the Battle of the Catalonian Plains in 455. Now, this docudrama is really well done. We see some quite amazing reconstructions of Constantinople in the mid-5th century, which is stupendously well done and something which I always wanted to see. Then the costumes and military equipment of those times are also really accurate. The Emperor Theodosius II is wearing accurate garment, the paludamentum and the fibula exactly as seen, for example, on the disc of Theodosius. So they really did their homework here. Or the soldiers at the Battle of the Catalonian Plains wear equipment that would have been quite similar to what late Western Roman Comitatensis legions might have looked like. Now sure, Aetius wears armor more akin to 200 years earlier, but then again in other instances they are really accurate again. Pileus Panonicus again here, late Roman tunic here, chlamys there, really good. Now the only thing I didn't like was Attila the Hun himself. Attila probably had Asian facial features, but the actor doesn't look like that at all. There are also some other things that are not very accurate. For instance, the role of Theodoric II in the Battle of the Catalonian Plains is completely left out in order to increase Aetius' role. But overall, still really well done and entertaining. Number 3. Gladiator. Come on friends, this one had to be. Now sure, as in the case with the fall of the Roman Empire, strictly speaking it's not the late Roman Empire we're dealing with here, but it is at least the later Roman Empire, 200 years after Caesar or Augustus. This movie is probably the most famous on the list. It was a huge success when it released in the cinemas back in 2000, and so probably I don't have to say too much about the plot. But of course there are some wild inaccuracies, but then again it is a fictitious story. Like the fall of the Roman Empire, Marcus Aurelius here too does not want Commodus to become emperor, instead nominating the tribune Maximus as his successor, which sets a huge chain reaction of events into motion. In reality, of course, we know that Marcus Aurelius did the exact opposite. He wanted his son to become his successor on the throne. It appears that people just want to believe that Marcus was always a wise and noble emperor, but the reality is that even the best people sometimes make the worst mistakes. That's just human nature. There are of course some other inaccuracies. For instance, don't expect a realistic depiction of the city of Rome of those days. The streets and the fora in some shots look super exaggerated regarding their size. Of course, Rome was monumental, but these towering structures are Hollywoodized and already too exaggeratedly monumental and really not historically accurate, but at least they got the Colosseum quite right. I don't have to say much about the actors, they are super famous and did an incredible job. So this Ridley Scott classic is an absolute must-watch for every fan of Roman history. Number 2. Agora. Agora is one of those quite unknown movies, which is sad because it's actually really probably the best movie ever made about the late Roman Empire. The movie takes place from 391 to 415 AD, so over a quite long time span, but these 20 plus years are condensed into a single continuous plot. Seldomly do we see movies set in the late Roman Empire, so this is already a very nice and welcome departure from Hollywood's usual obsession with Julius Caesar. It tells the story of the religious riots that broke out in Alexandria of the year 391 AD, which culminated in the destruction of the Serapion of Alexandria by a fanatic early Christian mob. It also tells the sad story of how early Christianity ended the 1,000-year-old traditions of Greco-Roman polytheism, and how the old temples of antiquity were closed and started to fall into ruin. It really gets many things right, but of course it's sometimes over-dramatized, and unfortunately they injected an unnecessary love plot into the movie that in my opinion really did not have to be, and which is quite cringe-worthy at times. Yet despite this, I would say that the movie is historically quite accurate. Now sure, the costumes again are not perfect. Here too we see Roman soldiers that are completely out of place, wearing Lorica segmentata armor, Gallia helmet and even pila from at least 200 years earlier. But despite this, the general feel and atmosphere of late antique Alexandria is captured very nicely. I think that this is what Alexandria around the year 400 AD would have looked like. The actors do a very good job, the story is engaging despite the forced love theme, and so overall I think this is an excellent watch for anyone interested in late Roman history. Number 1. BBC Rise and Fall of an Empire, The Fall of Rome. This is my personal favorite, but of course we all know that movie ratings are really highly subjective, and so you might of course have another personal favorite. This is the last episode of the 6-part BBC docudrama which I mentioned before, dealing with the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, and this particular episode treats the events around the sack of Rome in 410 AD by the Visigoths. Now there are several reasons why this particular docudrama episode made it to my personal number 1 spot. First of all, it is surprisingly accurate. Seriously, we seldomly see something quite as accurate. They even get some quite unknown details right, such as Olympius' manipulation of Honorius, the downfall of Stilicho and its implications, the pogrom against Germanic people in Rome, the unfair treatment of Alaric, the attire and the military equipment of soldiers of those times. Then they have a quite incredible reconstruction of ancient Rome. We see some interesting backdrops of Rome during the sack itself. But most importantly, the characters are quite realistic. I really like how they painted Alaric as a reluctant conqueror, being forced into action by the ill-advised actions of Honorius, or better his minister Olympius, which of course all tragically culminates in the sack of Rome, where the episode impressively shows that there were no real winners here. Honorius is also brilliantly portrayed, and I think this is a very accurate depiction of how Honorius probably was. An insecure guy that was very overburdened with the job of Western Roman Emperor in those difficult times, and who probably had wished to have a different job, and whose insecurity made it possible to be influenced by powerful ministers such as Olympius. It's of course quite brutal to watch because, well, Rome is sacked and we think like 10 times that this could have been avoided had some better decisions been made, but alas, this is how history happened and we cannot change it. But this final episode of the BBC docudrama series is for me the most accurate representation of the late Roman Empire. It has historical accuracy and good entertainment value, and thus is a definitive must-watch for every fan of late Roman history. Hopefully more documentaries or movies will be made about that fascinating time period. I would really like to see a movie about Majorian or about Belisarius in the Gothic Wars. We can still dream, and maybe one day we'll see these things when hopefully the movie industry finally realizes that there's more to Roman history than just Julius Caesar. Don't get me wrong, I love Caesar like any other Romaboo, but I think we have explored that time already enough, and more exploration of the late Roman Empire would be highly welcomed by many people around the world. And please like this video and subscribe so that you won't miss any future videos on the fascinating era of the late Roman Empire. And please consider supporting my work on Patreon or via YouTube membership, because the long-term sustainability of this channel really depends on your support. And I would especially like to thank our new Kaiser supporter Craig Miller. Thank you so much, Craig, for supporting this channel in such a generous way. Seriously, this channel would not work without our amazing Patreon and YouTube members, and I want to thank each and everyone who is supporting this channel in any form. Gratias tibiago, amici. And if you are interested in learning more about another much less famous sack of Rome, you can watch this video here in the upper right corner. But if you are more interested in learning what damage the sacks did to Rome, you can watch the other video in the lower right corner. I say thanks again to all friends of Roman history, gratias tibiago and bene valete.